I just want to start with the news that many people are switching on their TVs this morning to discover Caroline Flack found dead, the former presenter of Love Island. Now, of course, she was arrested and charged with assault before reportedly taking her own life. How careful do you think the Crown Prosecution Service needs to be when dealing with individuals who are clearly vulnerable?
Well, first of all, given that somebody has died here, I just want to pass on my thoughts, and I'm sure many people watching this will be sad to hear somebody only 40 years old being lost like this. Of course, there is a duty of care for everybody involved in these things, but I think we should be pretty careful at this stage. We don't know the circumstances as yet, and there's obviously quite a bit more to the background to this in terms of, as you say, there was this ongoing CPS work. But look, I don't want to jump in and complicate what is already a complex situation.
Yeah, that is, of course, very understandable. At the same time, this is the third death linked to Love Island after two former contestants also took their lives after appearing on the show. Is that a cause for concern? Do you think that Love Island should still go ahead?
Well, I do think that there clearly people making these programmes do have that sort of duty of care, not just to contestants, but as we've seen to presenters as well. But I don't want to jump to conclusions here, because there may be, in fact, we know there are other circumstances involved in this Caroline Flack case. So let's wait and see. But yes, of course, I mean, there should always be a duty of care. And by the way, also, online harms, and we know that, or think we know that social media and potential of all the things which have been talked about so much this past few weeks, months and years of online bullying and things like that can play a part. So, the government's doing its bit with that consultation launched in the week. But, of course, there's a duty of care. But I think beyond that, it's difficult to sort of comment without knowing all the facts here.
Yeah, as you say, a very kind of complex and sad story this morning. I'm keen to move on to Storm Dennis, something else that is going to be affecting many of our viewers this morning. You, of course, as Transport Secretary, are going to be very across the disruption that the storm is causing and could potentially still cause. Is the UK really equipped to deal with these kind of weather conditions?
We certainly seem to be getting more of these extreme weather conditions, and we all know the reasons and the background to that. But actually, the UK is also stepping up its response. So I was having a look at the homes flooded is incredibly sad. It disrupts people's lives beyond all belief, and some people are having their lives disrupted time and time again. I was looking at the figures. 800 homes have been flooded since last Friday, so that's obviously tragic. 23,000 homes that would have otherwise been flooded have actually been protected by these measures that have been put in place. And the government's sort of put £2.4 billion into protection up until next year, for the 6 years up until next year. But to give you a sort of idea of the scale of what we want to do now, we're putting another £4 billion in place for the next 6-year period. So we're really massively increasing the spending on storm defence and flood defences, which I think absolutely the right thing to do. People will have seen the pictures on your programme of the Army pitching in there in Yorkshire and elsewhere today, which is really important that the whole machinery of government acts to try to protect people's homes. But it is a fact of climate change that we will have to do more going forward.
Yeah, of course, you're keen to emphasise what the government is doing, the money that you're putting in. But as you say, these extreme weather conditions do seem to be becoming more regular, more normal. Storm Kira's already kind of wrecked many people's homes, and Storm Dennis now giving others a battering. I mean, some of these areas, particularly in Yorkshire, were promised much more help back in 2015 when there were floods there. Some will be thinking that if this kind of thing was happening in London, it wouldn't have taken so long for the help to reach the areas.
Well, I think in a sense, if the weather is extreme, these things can never come fast enough. I mean, that's absolutely true. And you're right, more help was promised, I think, in 2015. That scheme got designed quite quickly in 2017, and it's due to be finished in 2021. It's not behind its schedule or anything. These are just massive and very complex schemes to deliver as well. But as I mentioned, 23,000 homes have been protected in the last week that wouldn't have been if some of the other measures hadn't taken place. But every single home that's flooded, let's make no bones about it, is a complete tragedy. I visited the homes of people who've been affected by storms and floods in the past, and it is just a complete tragedy. It's sort of, you know, but because it is your home, it can really, really, you know, affect your life in a very, very significant way. And what the government wants to do is as much as possible, which is why, as I say, the budget's going up to 4 billion from 2.4 billion for the next period, and all of this work's ongoing on some very big, complex engineering projects.
OK, I'm keen to talk to you as well, while we've got you, about a story that's on the front page of the Sunday Times this morning. Now, this is reporting Number 10 Aid saying that they're not bluffing about scrapping the BBC licence fee and replacing it with a subscription, and saying that the BBC should be pruned back. I mean, is that true? Is that really what Number 10 thinks?
I'd be pretty cautious of sort of some unattributed comments. I mean, here are the facts we know. That, you know, the world's changing. We live in a sort of Netflix world where people do more and more, you know, put the TV on when they want to and watch what they want when they want to, and that sort of thing. So obviously the BBC's got to change, but we know that there's a consultation out there. It's primarily focused around things like whether it should be a criminal offence not to pay a licence fee, or whether it should be treated the same as all other utilities, which of course you still have to pay your water bill or what have you. But it's just a consultation at this stage, and there are no further decisions made at all.
I mean, that's the point, though, isn't it?
No, I think
that's the point, isn't it?
Probably running away a bit.
Because you say that it's consultation, but many people picking up a copy of the Sunday Times this morning would think that actually it's a consultation to which Number 10 has already decided the answer to.
No, I don't think that's right at all. You know, I don't want to say that not everything in a newspaper is always necessarily 100% correct and it still makes the front page exactly. But, you know, the BBC is, I would say, a much-loved national treasure. We all want it to be a huge success, but everybody, including the BBC themselves, recognise that in a changing world, you know, the BBC itself will have to change. I mean, that's just a fact of life. But it's simply not the case that there's some preordained decision about the future funding of the BBC out there. Apart from anything else, by the way, this charter runs to 2027, so there's a long way to go on all these things, and certainly no decisions. That's the point of a consultation.
OK. Now, of course, the very fact that you're talking to us this morning means that you kept your job in the reshuffle last week. Congratulations. Someone not quite so lucky was the Chancellor, Sajid Javid, who quit after Number 10 demanded that he sack all of his aides and set up a joint economic unit between Number 10 and Number 11. I mean, this sounds like a power grab, doesn't it?
Well, first of all, I just want to say of Sajid Javid, he was a great colleague, and I thought he was doing a good job as Chancellor, and had a string of very high-profile jobs before that, Home Secretary, etc. But in the end, actually, I suspect viewers are probably watching this conversation and going, yeah, I would expect that everybody, all the advisors, certainly my advisors in transport, I want them to be working hand in glove. This is an incredibly ambitious government that wants to deliver stuff for people
but he had to sack,
and get on with it.
His advisors. That's the point. His advisors weren't allowed to work hand in glove with Number 10. He was told to sack them all.
Well, look,
would you have accepted those terms?
I wasn't in the room, and nor were you, but what I do think is that it's a good thing to have, and certainly the way that my special advisors work is I want them to be working closely with Number 10. I want them to be delivering the same policy, and we've got this massive sort of agenda of levelling up the country and uniting the country, and that's best done when you're all on the same page and singing from the same hymn sheet. So, you know, I've no doubt at all that in terms of making, you know, what people really care about, in my case, transport things, if we can get the trains running on time, we've got a lot to do to do that, etc. If we're going to level up, then you'd expect us to all be wanting the same thing and not have different silos and different locations. So you know, more to the good, I think, if we can get this government delivering for people every single day of the week by everybody being on the same page.
So if you had gone into your meeting with Boris Johnson last week and he'd asked you to sack all of your advisors, would you have gone along with it?
Well, here's the thing. You know, primarily I work with, you know, the Prime Minister and others. Of course, you have some advisors who work with each other to sort of line things up across government policy, and that's perfectly right and normal and proper. But I'd be pretty concerned if my advisors weren't working hand in glove. That would be a concern to me, let alone to Number 10. I want to get things delivered for this country, and that's what this government is pushing on and doing, which is, you know, an exciting project with 5 years to go, and I want us all to be working in the same direction.
OK, now, according to reports, and I know that you'll probably say you can't believe everything that you read in the papers, but it's certainly coming from somewhere, Sajid Javid clashed with Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's chief aide. Now, when I spoke to Keir Starmer, and we'll hear the full interview later in the show, he said that Prime Minister's questions should be renamed DCQs, Dominic Cummings questions, because he's really the person who's running number 10. I mean, is he actually running the show?
Well, here's why that's just not correct. I find with all the Prime Minister's advisors, Dominic Cummings included, and they're there to provide advice, to, provide challenge, if you like, and, have a good debate about things. But it's not the case that things necessarily go Dominic Cummings' way or anyone else. And take HS2 this last week is a big decision that Dominic will have had views about. I had views about, in the end.
Did you clash with him on it,
It's not
then?
about always have... Sorry, say again?
Did you clash with him on it, then?
No, clash is just the wrong way to describe it. We discussed it, we discussed our varying views, and we came to a conclusion. But the idea that, just because Dominic thinks something, that's what happens, is clearly not the case, as in this example. But it doesn't mean that you clash with or fall out with or whatever. I value the advice, the Prime Minister values the advice, and we come to better decisions by making sure we're analysing all the data, particularly in the case of something like HS2, which was this enormous infrastructure decision for this country that took a lot of analysis and a lot of data. Why would you not want people who are going, hold on, that's interesting, why don't we get more information, why don't we look at it differently? But, in the end, we come to a decision and we collectively agree to it. As I say, just to sort of challenge your assertion, it's not the case that it should be PM, whatever you called it, Ds, but because actually we are perfectly capable of coming to conclusions which benefit everybody in this country, and that's what we're trying to do as a government. Big, ambitious projects, as well as things which will complete within the 5 years of this Parliament, so people see real improvements to their lives, particularly in my case within the transport area, but right across government. And having good people to advise is great, but advisors advise and ministers decide.
Talking about advisors, in the Mail on Sunday today, Andrew Sabisky, a new Downing Street advisor, according to the newspaper, had a couple of pretty controversial public comments that he made back in 2014, including saying one way to get around the problems of unplanned pregnancies, creating a permanent underclass, would be to legally enforce universal uptake of long-term contraception at the onset of puberty. He also said it's still unclear to what extent female genital mutilation represents a serious risk to young girls, and women's sport is more comparable to the Paralympics than it is to men's. Is that the kind of person you want in number 10?
Well, I'm afraid not only have I not seen the story, I don't actually know the individual you're referring to at all, so I'm afraid I'll probably have to disappoint you by not providing a commentary on any of that. I haven't heard about that at all.
Would you be concerned, though, if someone who had said those views publicly in the past was working in number 10?
You're enticing me by asking me the same question again. I simply haven't seen this. I don't know the individual. They're clearly not views that either I or the government itself shares in any way, shape or form. But I don't have the facts, so I don't want to just shoot from the hip on this one.
OK. Now, a couple of, just to finish on the reshuffle, that we've seen the number of women in Cabinet has gone down as a result of it. The number of people educated in private schools has gone up as a result. The number of people from ethnic minority backgrounds has also gone down. Does that matter? Are you worried about not having a Cabinet that's representative of the people?
Well, I think you're sort of talking at ones and twos levels here, but what you've forgotten to mention is the number of parliamentary under-secretaries of state. Now, that's the vast majority of ministers in this government.
And the most
those
junior.
Are the PUSs, they're the most junior, but it's also the most ministers as well. For the first time ever in British history, 50-50 of those are women to men. So we've made a huge step forward. And, in terms of diversity in Cabinet, this is still the most diverse Cabinet that we've ever had, apart from the last one. I mean, it's absolutely not the case that there's some sort of big reversal there. And what's happening, of course, is because we've now got 50% women at those, as you rightly say, the lower rung of the ministerial ladder, but nonetheless where most of the ministers actually sit. It means that they can clearly come through. The best of those people will be future cabinet ministers, and who knows, perhaps the third female prime minister in this country. And I think it's interesting and revealing that it's always the Conservative Party that has had women prime ministers, and that we're, at this point in time, with half of all of our junior ministers now women. I think it bodes well for the future.
Quickly to end, After all the drama of the last week, is the budget still going to go ahead as planned on March the 11th?
Well, I know that the budget plans are well advanced, but I also know that Rishi Sunak, the new Chancellor, may want time. I haven't heard whether the date in March is confirmed as yet. He's probably looking at it, I should think, this week. So I'll leave it to the Treasury to announce that. But I just have to say, Rishi, who is now Chancellor, was a fantastic Chief Secretary to the Treasury. That's the position that he's come from. Previously, we all worked with him very closely. He'll be a terrific Chancellor of the Exchequer, I think. And whenever the budget is, I'm sure it will be a huge success for this country. And we're really going to spend the next few weeks, months and years levelling up this country and really trying to do the things that people want in return for them having trusted us with their support, which we appreciate. It's been lent to us and we intend to deliver on it.